The path to hell is paved with good intentions. Hello, and thank you for watching. Hopefully, you guys are liking this content that I'm putting up here on this channel. It takes a lot longer than I would have ever expected. So hopefully, you guys are enjoying it. If you do like the content, please like and subscribe. It really helped me reach more and more people. So thank you so much. Today, I want to talk about unintended consequences, meaning you try and do good. You want to save everyone. But as the saying goes, the path to hell is paved with good intentions. And as always, I'm going to lead with an example of an unintended consequence. The housing market in 1949, which increased the number of public housing, was a great plan in theory, right? It was, let's help people who are at their lowest and provide them with the bare necessities so that they can get a leg up in life. So if you make less than this, you qualify for government housing and possibly not have a payment for rent, right? Which makes sense. And if you make less than this amount, let's go ahead and maybe they qualify for food stamps as well. And then also with more government assistance, if you make less than X amount, also, you might even get free health care for you and your family. That sounds like a beautiful plan, right? It's a beautiful plan to truly help people get them to the next level in life. Right? Where you have nothing, we're going to help provide everything that you need so that you can take the next step and prosper. Unfortunately, this good intention didn't account for human nature. Studies show that if you want to get a reaction out of someone, don't motivate them, scare them. And what could be scary about the situation? Well, assuming you're currently using these benefits, and if you go and get yourself a better paying job, your family could lose, let's say, the healthcare or the food stamps, or even worse, your family could lose housing. So the government's real human nature proposal, right? Because we're talking about human nature here. The real proposal was, we'll give you everything for free to help you. We'll give you housing. We'll give you food. We'll give you healthcare. And when you're ready, we want you to go ahead and get back out there and get that stressful 14-hour plus 14-hour a week job. And when you're doing that, now we also want you to pay for housing. We're going to take away the government assistance. We're going to take away the health care and the food stamps. That's what you're going to get in return. So we'll give you everything now, but once you get off your feet, we're taking everything away from you later. What's the deal with that? Like, that scares everyone, right? That is the opposite of what we're trying to do. And what ended up happening was a large group of people never trying to better themselves for the fear of losing everything. Thus, we have the projects. Now, I don't blame the government for this, as long as we learn from our mistakes, right? I mean, that I don't know if ever in time in history where you'd have government projects like that in other societies, but it's at least you tried, right? But we have to learn from those mistakes, meaning govern with logic, not with the heart. The heart has a 50% divorce rate, right? It's just not a reliable source for wisdom. Hence, I bring you Elizabeth Warren, the Congress lady that said she was a minority and that she was half Indian. She felt our minority struggles growing up because she was one of us, being half Indian. This turned out obviously to be an absolute lie, but I digress. We'll just move from there. But she clearly is a part of the problem, trying to show how righteous she is in saving American family jobs. Let me go ahead and let's watch her question the Fed chairman, Mr. Jerome Powell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the Fed has raised interest rates 8 times over the last year in what has been the most extreme rate hike cycle in 40 years. The Fed's goal is to slow inflation, and your tool, raising interest rates, is designed to slow the economy and throw people out of work. So far, you haven't tipped the economy
Did you hear that? Your job is to slow inflation and throw people out of work. That's pretty condescending.
into recession, but you haven't brought inflation entirely under control either. And maybe the reason for that is that other things are also keeping prices high, things you can't fix with high interest rates, things like price gouging and supply chain kinks and a war in
Price gouging because, the big bad companies are always price gouging, and that's evil to the people.
Ukraine. But you are determined to continue to raise interest rates, so I want to take a look at where you're headed. In December, the Fed released its projections on the state of the economy under your monetary policy plan. According to the Fed's own report, if you continue raising interest rates as you plan, unemployment will be 4.6% by the end of the year.
Now let's take that number. Remember, unemployment will be 4.6% by the end of the year. That's important.
More than a full point higher than it is today. Chair Powell, if you hit your projections, do you know how many people who are currently working, going about their lives, will lose their jobs?
I don't have that number in front of me. I will say it's not
just
an
a math
intended
problem.
consequence. It's
Well,
not,
but it is, and it's in your report, and that would be about 2 million people who would lose their jobs. People who are working right now, making
She
their
said 2
mortgages.
million people.
So, Chair Powell, if you could speak directly to the 2 million hardworking people who have decent jobs today, who you're planning to get fired over the next year, what would you say to them?
You hear that? Talk to these families who you're going to get them fired. What would you say to them, you evil, rich, white male that thinks you run everyone's lives?
How would you explain your view that they need to lose their jobs?
I would explain to people more broadly that inflation is extremely high and it's hurting the working people of this country badly. All of them, not just 2 million of them, but all of them are suffering under high inflation, and we are taking the only measures we have to bring inflation down.
And
all right, so it continues on like that. But here you have Elizabeth Warren telling Mr. Powell that he needs to talk to 2 million people who are going to lose their job, right? He needs to explain to them why. Why is it so important that they need to be losing their job? Well, if Mr. Jerome Powell doesn't fix inflation, then it's not only going to hurt those 2 million people that she's claiming, but it's going to hurt 331 million people, right? If they don't get inflation under control, inflation is going to ruin everybody, this whole darn economy. Let me give you an example what I'm talking about here, as I like to, right? So here you got, currently the unemployment rate is at 3.6%. That's 5.9 million people who are unemployed. And she's saying that it's going to go to 4.6%. So let's go to 4.6. Okay. And so we get an idea what 4.6% looks like. And that's June of 2007. So right now it's 5.9 million. Okay. You guys got that? 5.9 million at 3.6. It's going to go to 4.6 per her projections. She said, and so let's go there. 4.6, go to June. Whoops. 4.6, June 2007, 4.6% rate is 6.9 million people. So it's not 2 million people that are going to be unemployed. It's roughly 1 million people. But I mean, it's another lie from Pocahontas. What do you expect, right? It's another lie. So, but what she's not saying and what she's not thinking, and the unintended consequence of trying to save 1 million jobs is what happens when the economy tanks like it did in 2008, which, by the way, many professionals are saying that that's what is going to happen. And you guys seen what just happened on the bank, but I'll go into that here in a second. But if she does not stop inflation, then the unemployment rate could go back to what it was in 2008. And then instead of losing, 5.9 million to 6.9 million, we could have 15 million people unemployed. 15 million people unemployed if he listens to Pocahontas's heart instead of any logic. So it's very misleading doing what she's doing. And of course, the Fed chair said it's in later in the conversation, it's more complicated than what you're making it. But nevertheless, what I don't get is these government people don't understand that inflation is not created by companies. Like that's what the government wants you to think, that that companies create inflation because who's charging you more? Not the government. It's the company that's charging you more. But how does inflation even begin? Inflation begins because there's too much money, right? And too few goods. Do you guys remember the Mansa Musa video that I put out a while back? He gave gold to everybody. So when he came back from his trip from Mecca, it ended up being that the gold was worth nothing, was useless. He had to borrow it back at high interest rates to try and kill inflation. Well, that's what's been happening with our economy. The government supplies more money. The only entity in the world that can supply us with more money for America and the dollar is the Fed. That's it. And the Fed is what prints more money, which creates inflation. So let me give you an example. Again, with these social programs that we put into place, we didn't have the money to pay for these social programs. So what did we do? We just printed money. And then we printed so much money that we didn't have enough gold to back up all the money. So we got off the gold standard, right? And then we continue to give money away. Even let's go with COVID, right? COVID, if you guys remember the video I talked about for COVID, yes, everyone got a check because we didn't know what was going to go on. We just wanted to make sure people had enough money for food. That's great. And then for the second round of stimulus checks and the third round of stimulus checks, there were some people saying, hey, let's find out if people need it first. Let's give it to the people who need it. But instead, the government said, no, let's give it to everyone. So everybody got these huge government bailout checks, whether you needed them or not. Where did it come from? Where? They created it. It was just created. So now it's creating more inflation. And it started, back actually in 2009, right? I think it was February. I'm not sure when exactly, but 2009, the Fed's funds rate went to zero. So now you're giving away free money for 10 years. And then COVID hits in 2020. And now you're making more money. Because where did it come from? Who knows? It just, somebody wrote a check somewhere, I guess, right? So let me give you another example of how the government is going to hurt us some more. Like this bank scenario at SVB Bank. Okay. In the short term, it looks like they might have saved the economy, the government, right? Because they had a bank run. And what the fear is because that's a mid-sized bank, or maybe a large, but probably more like a mid-size, is people are going to say, oh my gosh, what about my mid-sized bank or my mid-sized credit union down the street? I'm going to take money from there and put it to Chase or put it to Bank of America, all the big banks, right? So the government was scared of that happening. So what they did was they're like, hey, we're going to bail this out to create consumer confidence. So people are not scared. They know we're going to bail it out. And then of course, the lie is taxpayers will not pay for this. That is an absolute lie. They said that the money is going to come from the insurance fund, the bank insurance fund, right? Well, let's take a look at these numbers here, right? Oh my gosh, I got to get this out of here. Okay, well, that sucked. Nevertheless, so the insurance fund is has $128 billion for FDIC, okay, as of the end of last year. So FDIC insures you $250,000, up to $250,000, and that fund where the money comes from has $128 billion. And what the government is telling us, because, we're not smart enough, of course, right? They're going to just tell us what they want. They're saying, don't worry, the money is not coming from the American taxpayer. It's coming from the insurance fund. Well, guess how much the bailout is? The bailout is $175 billion. So you got $128 billion in this bucket, and you're going to give 175 billion in a couple of days. So first of all, there's already a deficit there. There's already a deficit. So what is the government going to have to do immediately? Oh, that's right. Create more money to then create more inflation. So then Fed chairman says, oh, guess what? This 1% that it might go up higher, now it's got to be more. More because the governments won't allow capitalism to do its job, to work itself out. All right. So the scenario also goes, they say that it's coming from the insurance fund. That's BS, because if they empty that insurance fund to zero, like they said they're going to do, because it's all coming from there, then that means nobody has insurance, because there's no pot of gold to take money from. There'll be no insurance at all for anybody, for FDIC, because it'll be run dry. So of course they're not going to take everything from the FDIC. The government's just going to create that $175 billion, right? And then it's going to go into circulation. And then there we go, more inflation. Now, let me wrap it up with this clip right here. This guy actually gets it, and I appreciate him for this. So let's see what he says.
But I think it's undeniable. It's undeniable that the only way we're going to get this sticky inflation down is to attack it on the monetary side, which you're doing, and on the fiscal side, which means Congress has got to reduce the rate of growth of spending and reduce the rate of growth of debt accumulation. Now, I get that you don't want to get in the middle of that fight. But the more we help on the fiscal side, the fewer people you're going to have to put out of work. Isn't that a fact?
Please answer.
It could work out that way.
Okay.
Sir?
It could work out that way.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Kennedy. Senator Reed of Rhode Island is recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
All right. You guys hear that? That guy is saying exactly what I just stated, that if they can help them out on the government side by not accumulating more debt, then that would mean we put less people out of work. But what's the first thing that everyone's going to say? What our administration just did? We're bailing them out. Oh, and last but not least, you know why the taxpayers are going to pay for this? Because first of all, they're not taking everything out of the insurance fund. That is asinine. That means nobody has insurance, right? FDIC insurance. But what they're going to do is obviously they're going to lend the $175 billion, okay? And then they're going to also get a rate of return. So the government actually is going to make money off of this. But how are they going to make money off of this? How do banks make money? Fees, right? They're going to charge more in fees. Yes, it's the 10-to-1 or whatever for lending purposes, but they also make a ton of money in fees. So what they're going to need to do is they're going to raise the fees. And who pays for the fees? Oh, the customer. Who's the customer? The taxpayer. So yes, the government's going to talk in a couple of years. We made $100 million off of this $175 billion investment. Great. No. The people, the taxpayer, paid it all back for them. And again, with that, more inflation. So nevertheless, there's my take on the SVB, on the what the Fed's trying to do, and Pocahontas, Miss Elizabeth Warren. Nevertheless, regardless of how things go, it's important for us to remember life is not meant to be, it's meant to create. Too strong.